Oh, there's no one so far. Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. I think I'm going to wait maybe 2 to 3 minutes before we get started. Give everybody some time to hop on. But thanks for being here. Hello. Okay, that's definitely what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait 2 minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. Oh no, I see someone said I struggled to find it, so some other people might be trying to find it too. Yeah, I will wait. That's why I always wait a few minutes, give people some time to figure it out. Technology's confusing. Hello, hello. For those of you that are just joining us, I was saying I'm going to wait maybe another couple of minutes to give everyone some time to make their way here, and then we'll get started. Hello, hello. All right. So it seems like things are slowing down a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in, I think, because we have a lot to cover tonight, and I want to make sure that we get to it all. Someone is asking how to find it on PC. I don't know if those of you that are on your PCs can help her out. I know we're streaming live from the Road to College Facebook page and also the Road to College YouTube channel. So if you know how to access either of those from your PC, I think hopefully it would be easy to find from there. But okay, yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me get my screen all set up here. Alrighty, here we go. Okay. So hello, everybody. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. These Facebook Lives or these live streams are usually done by our CEO, Brad, but he is away at a conference this week. So I am filling in for him. I have some big shoes to fill, but my name is Ariel. I am the essay coaching and partnerships manager, bootcamp supervisor here at Prompt. Some background about me. I studied neuroscience and behavior at Vassar. I've been at Prompt since 2017, starting as a writing coach And now I train all of our writing coaches and our counselors and people on how to utilize the prompt approach. I love doing things like this because it brings me back to my writing coaching days. I get to interact with families and some students. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. Like I was saying, we have so much to cover tonight. Some info on prompt in case you don't know who we are. As this slide says, we're the world's leading provider of college essay coaching and feedback. We provided feedback on over 90,000 essays. We've worked with more students on more essays than any company in the world by 20x compared to the closest company. So we are doing a lot of what we do, and we pride ourselves in doing it to the best of our abilities. We collaborate with writing researchers on a lot of what we do, and we have a focus and a mission of ultimately improving student writing. So everything that we're discussing tonight is coming from that particular lens. All right. Oh, I should say too, I have my lovely colleague Danielle helping me here. She's monitoring the chat. If you have questions at any point on anything that I'm covering, please go ahead and just drop it in the chat. She's going to stop. I'm going to try and stop periodically for questions, but she'll also, virtually tap me if there's something that you're asking that is pertains to what we are doing or what I'm speaking about this evening. You'll see my co-host right here, Pontus. That's my cat. Speaking of majoring in neuroscience and behavior, she's named after a brain structure. So she's also joining us in the background this evening. Yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So we are, I want to back up again. Thank you for saying my cat is cute. So just a quick summary too before I dive in on everything that we're covering. I just like to give a broad overview. So tonight we are going to be talking about how schools are evaluating students, how all of the pieces of the application fit together. So many families, students, and parents that I talk to seem to focus on one particular piece of the application, and oftentimes that's the academic portion of things. So we want to just give you a good idea of how all of those different pieces of the application fit together through the lens of data, which as a neuroscientist, I absolutely love. We want to make sure that you're clear on what you should focus on and what you, if you're a student, if you're a parent, what your student should actually write about in their essays. So we are going to cover all of those things. Let me know in the chat, do we have any underclassmen here? Are you parents of only rising seniors, or do we have some junior parents here, maybe some sophomore parents? I'm just curious. Either way, if we do have parents of underclassmen here, or some underclassmen themselves, this info should still be very helpful because you're going to have a clear understanding of what you can do to set yourself up well in the admissions process when the time comes. Rising seniors, you are right on time. I see rising sophomore as well. Very snaps to you for being very on top of it. Okay, awesome. Okay, so what does my audience care about? So this is a very important thing to keep in mind because most students up until this point have not really written for an audience before outside of a teacher as their audience. So it's very important for students to understand who they're actually writing for to make sure that they're actually writing about the right things. So students need to keep in mind that your audience for your college essays is going to be admissions officers. All right. So a critical part of having a successful essay is understanding what your particular audience is looking for. All right. So in our case, with an audience of admissions officers, they are going to be looking for proof that you will be successful in college and beyond. So they want to make sure that you're going to succeed in college and after you graduate. So what does this mean exactly? This can be kind of confusing, or a lot of people think that it means different things, but really colleges are wanting to make sure that you are going to do well and succeed in your classes. They want to know that you are going to contribute positively to the college campus, the community, what's going on there. They want to know that you are going to do well in whatever you choose to do in the future. And they want to have an understanding of how attending their particular school is going to help you achieve your goals or put you on the path to achieving your goals. And then something else that's very important to note as well, they also want to make sure that you will pay tuition, right? They want to make sure that you're going to be able to pay tuition, and they want to make sure that you are going to, be able to contribute. That's the main thing, all right? They want to make sure that you have the best life outcomes by attending their particular school. So let's talk about admissions data and some of the science behind what we are talking about later this evening as we talk about approaching essays, what you should be including in your essays, and what those admissions readers are looking for. So we kind of break this into, well, first of all this data is coming from a study that was done after a lawsuit against Harvard. So all of this data, admissions data, is very hard to obtain. Most schools keep it on a lock and key. And so really the only reason we're able to take a deep dive into this data is because of this lawsuit against Harvard. So we saw that really schools are breaking up their admissions criteria for their students into two sections: an academic score and a personal score. So we have this graph here. Let me see here if I can make it. Oh, you can see it pretty well on here. So you see that we have an academic bar here. So this academic bar really means that if you are above this particular academic bar, the college believes you are capable of doing the work and succeeding academically at their school. If you're below the academic bar, it's pretty difficult, I would say very difficult, to get into that particular school. So that's the academic section of things. And then we have the personal section of things. So everything in your personal score really needs to come together to create a narrative, which we call a personal brand here at Prompt. So within your personal score, that consists of things like your essays, your rec letters, your extracurricular activities, your hobbies, and then interviews if that pertains to your particular situation. And then I glossed over this, but your academic score is the things that you would think of. It's your GPA, your transcripts, your test scores, the level of the curriculum that you are taking at your particular school. So those are the kinds of things that schools are looking at when they're considering applicants. Jumping back to your personal score and your personal brand, it's really important for students to keep in mind. This is the first thing that we work on them when we are coaching students and working with students, is we want to make sure that you're clear on your personal brand. Your personal brand is just really a fancy way of saying this is the story that you're going to be telling across your essays and your applications, making sure that your colleges understand what's important to you, what you want to do in the future, what traits you have. We're going to talk about traits later on, how you would fit on their campus, and really just how you would be an asset. So you're making sure that across your essays, you're painting this one picture that really highlights your personal brand. Readers are looking at this narrative in its totality. So it's more than just your academic scores or your personal scores. It's really everything coming together. We always like to remind students and families of how much time, or really I should say how little time, is being spent on your applications. Admissions readers spend a total of 8 minutes on each app on average. All right, so that's really not that much time. So it's really important to keep in mind that the story is really, that comes, all of the parts is really more important than kind of each individual part as they're looking through everything very quickly. So jumping back to this graph, people are rarely below the personal bar. So you'd have to have some kind of serious character flaws to be below that personal bar. So we're taking a look here at the this kind of increasing line that goes up diagonally. So some schools break the personal score into multiple categories. So for example, Harvard breaks this sort of graph into a personal score and an extracurricular score. Emory breaks it into a personal score and an intellectual curiosity score. University of Washington in Seattle breaks it into an academic score and a personal score only. So literally exactly like this graph. So schools are looking at different things, but ultimately, if you can keep in mind this particular concept of your academics and your personal score coming together, you have an understanding of the kind of the approach that schools are looking at when they are taking a look at student applications. So you can see, as I mentioned, this diagonal arrow moving into the upper right. If you have a high personal score, that can really make a big difference in your kind of progression and your likelihood of getting admitted. And I'm going to share some other information that might make that a little bit more clear for you. Okay, so we are breaking this into two parts. I'll start with the academic score distribution. So I want to say again, schools do not like to release this data, and the only reason that we got it was because of this lawsuit against Harvard. So Brad read through this entire lawsuit and pulled out some really interesting data and information. So basically, the study found that 83% of all Harvard applicants were above the academic bar. In this particular time period, that was about 40,000. There were about 40,000 applicants during this time period, and there were 60,000 applicants just this past year. So this data may have shifted slightly, but it should still, hold. You should be able to get the main idea. Something that's really important to remember for this academic score too is that students really self-select the schools that they're applying to based on this academic score. So what that means is when students are trying to decide what schools they're applying to, they're usually picking by looking at things like GPA, transcripts, test scores, again. So if you look at an applicant pool for a particular university, all of the students are really going to have very similar academic scores, right? So the thing that's really left to set them apart is their personal score, which we're going to talk about more in just a moment. But I want to talk to you about some of these the breakdown of this scoring percentages. So you see the exceptional category here, it's 0.5%. So the people that fall in this category, Brad describes them as like world chess champions. All right, this is a very small, very different, unique population of students. The majority of students are going to fall into the strong or sufficient category. So 8,000 applicants have a perfect 80 out of 80 on their academic score. And it's all based on context, all right? So schools are looking at your curriculum based on the offering at your particular school. So for example, if your particular school doesn't have AP Calculus, they're not going to hold that against you. All right, they are going to look to see that you took the strongest course load possible that you could based on what was offered at your particular school. A fun fact though, speaking of AP Calculus is the class that's most highly correlated with academic success in these types of scoring systems here. Just a fun fact. So something to keep in mind, all right? So of that 40,000 number that I mentioned earlier, 8,000 applicants have a perfect 80 out of 80 score, which to me, that is still a lot of students. Obviously, it's less than 40,000, but if you think about an applicant pool, 8,000 people still have a perfect academic score, all right? So academics really don't do, I think, what a lot of people think they do to set you apart, all right? So that really brings us to our personal score. So I touched on this earlier. Almost no one is below the personal bar. These are people that actually have very serious character flaws. So let's take a look at these other categories. So similarly, this exceptional category, this 0.03% of students, this is less than 10 applicants to Harvard a year that get this score. These are students that have like founded some nationally known nonprofit or something along those lines. You really have to be doing something big above and beyond to be considered in this exceptional category here. So our focus again is on this strong and sufficient categories. And it's fascinating here because you see the majority of students fall into this sufficient category. There's a lot of compelling students that fall in this category, but their essays just read flat. So students weren't able to really share their experiences in a compelling way with admissions officers. So we're always telling students that it's not just about what you did, but it's also how you write about those experiences. This could also similarly be about your rec letters, who you chose to write them and how they wrote those letters about you. Those kinds of things can really make a difference. So students that are within this sufficient category within admissions, their rate of admission is 2.5%, whereas the students in the strong category, their likelihood of being admitted jumps up to 25%. That's like 10 times, which is wild. So we think about, how do I get into this strong category? And it's really through your essays. All right. So we want to make sure that you are taking the time to really, work on your essays and put in that work. I have a lot of families and students that ask me, how can I make sure that I get into XYZ school? What can I do to make my application really stand out? And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet answer. But one of the things that you can do to give yourself the most control possible in this process is really make sure that you're doing everything you can to have strong essays. And 75% of Harvard admits had this strong score in their personal score. So making sure you're in the strong category can really make such a huge difference in your admissions chances. So in case you didn't realize it enough from all this data, strong academics can increase your admissions chances by up to 3 times, but strong non-academic things like your essays can increase your admissions chances by up to 10 times. So it's very, very important. Some things to just keep in mind. Georgia Tech receives about the same number of applications as Harvard per year, but accepts 5 times as many students. So when you're thinking about admissions rates as well, you want to think about the selectivity of the school and also the major that you're applying to. So some majors can play more of a role in your acceptance because there are some majors that are more difficult to get into. For example, Carnegie Mellon, comp sci, computer science, and theater or drama are very difficult majors to get into. So the requirements are much more stringent. So these are all things to keep in mind as you're trying to evaluate where you sit kind of on this admissions likelihood spectrum. There's also some aspect about being in-state and out-of-state. All of these things, there are some schools that publish that information. If they do publish it, it's usually pretty hard to find regarding their percentages of acceptance for in-state and out-of-state students. But these are all things that, are somewhat out of your control to figure out. We always encourage you, just focus on your essays. They can really make such a big difference. They don't take as long as you think, which we can chat about a little bit later on, but just make sure that you are putting in the effort to improve your writing abilities. That's ultimately what we're striving for here, is making sure that students are becoming better writers. Before I jump into everything else, I want to pause here. Danielle, were there any questions that came in that I should answer at the moment?
Yeah, so hi everybody. It looks like we had somebody ask if you know which AP calculus it is that is correlated with the high academic scores. Do you know if it's AB or BC or if it's just both?
I believe it's both. Brad mentioned that it's the just the coursework as a whole. So that covered both AP calculus, AB and BC.
Awesome. And we also had a question kind of asking if percentages are sort of similar for like non-Ivy League schools when it comes to, personal versus academics.
Great. Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's kind of what I was trying to touch on here at the end. So the admissions criteria is going to differ for, say, like an Ivy League school and like a large state school. So you kind of have to keep in mind those different factors, like in-state, out-of-state, the major that you're going to be applying to at that particular school. All of those things can kind of play a different role, what your individual situation is with your transcript, the curriculum available at your school. Different schools have different little formulas, magic mixes that they use. So it's hard to say what it looks like specifically for other schools, but we can say based on this Harvard data, this is largely applicable to most schools.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's all we have for questions that have to do with what we're talking about right now, but we can have a bigger session later with any other questions.
Amazing. Yes, I want to get into the essay stuff now, which I'm sure will bring up a lot more questions. So I'll try and make sure that I pause at a separate time or another time in the future. All right, so an important reminder, and I laugh because I run all of our boot camps here at Prompt, and I always tell students, you are going to be hearing this in your sleep, but we want to remind you that the purpose of your college application is really to prove you will be successful in college and beyond. All right, so in line with that, there's a lot of myths that surround proving you'll be successful in college and beyond, and also just what your essays should include. The biggest myth is that essays are about storytelling. So students are used to, they've never written essays like the ones that they're writing for these college applications. They have these formulas that they have learned in school that are really based in storytelling. They hear, okay, you need to share this journey, tell this story so colleges can learn more about who you are. So we find students writing the classic sports essay where they were like, I had this big game, I tore my ACL, but it was really difficult for me. I had surgery, and then I had to overcome to work and return back to my sport. And that taught me hard work and determination and all of these things. So that is just, it's not quite what schools are looking for a few different reasons. One, that's super, super common. And we want to make sure, too, one of the things that we're really hammering home to students is that they're being as specific as possible in these essays. So I always ask students when they are going to share a particular experience, how do you think, is it possible that another student, one of your friends or someone else that's applying to college, could have a similar story? What is the college going to learn about you that is different if someone were to have the same story for you? So we want to make sure that students are not just telling their story, but really sharing things in a strategic way. So if they do have an experience that may be somewhat common, that they are sharing it through the lens of what makes them unique, what their particular interests are, so schools can really get an idea of who they are and how their mind works. That's ultimately what schools are looking for. I want to take this opportunity too to share some of the other top myths that we hear in line with storytelling. So many students feel like they need to have these essays that are filled with like a bunch of fancy metaphors, elevated vocabulary, philosophical works of art, I like to call them. But this is not the case, all right? I think when students are getting started with the process, they Google good college essays. And the things that come up are the essays that are published in the New York Times and the Washington Post. And these are essays that are obviously very enjoyable to read, but those essays shouldn't be the goal for the majority of students. First of all, if we go back to talking about what we mentioned before, knowing your audience. So the people that are choosing these essays for the New York Times, the Washington Post, these are journalists, right? So the things that they're looking for in a good essay are going to be different than what your admissions reader is going to be looking for in your essay. So that's something to keep in mind. I also like to remind students that you don't have that much word count to work with. So using employing a lot of creative mechanisms and things can not only take up your word space, but it can also often get the good stuff that schools are wanting to know. So who you are, your journey, your traits, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, all the things that they're wanting to learn about you can get lost. The message that you're trying to convey can get lost in a lot of creative mechanisms and things. So it's best to keep your essays clear, concise, and in your own voice, all right? It's not so much about storytelling. Some other myths that I think are important to just cover while we're here. So many students feel like they need to write about the worst thing that's ever happened to them or some sort of huge experience. I have spoken to so many students that are like, I have no idea what to write about because I have, thankfully, just had like a very average life. I don't have one of those big moments. And I always tell them, because they say, I don't have one of those big moments, I'm boring. And I'm like, I can tell already just from speaking to you that you are not boring. You have so many interesting experiences, things that you like, things that you're wanting to pursue. All of those things are more important than some sort of big overarching experience. Often too, I tell them that students that have those experiences, they're often writing about the wrong things. So they think that they can write about this big experience to catch the reader's attention. But unfortunately, there are a lot of students that have had terrible things happen to them or big things happen to them. So it doesn't quite catch the reader's attention like you may think. And when you are focusing on some sort of big experience, you're often losing sight of what you should be covering, which is proving you'll be successful and beyond, and making sure that you're highlighting your top trait. Very important things to keep in mind. And then this final myth that I want to cover because it leads into the next point. So many students feel like they need to be extremely well-rounded. So varsity captain of their sport, speak 5 languages, volunteer every weekend, and simultaneously be finding a cure for cancer or something like that. Now, while that student probably could get into any school that they want and kind of maybe falls into that exceptional category we were speaking of before, colleges are really looking to build well-rounded campuses as opposed to a campus filled with well-rounded students. Does that make sense? So if you're a student that is passionate about one particular subject and you've taken time to pursue that interest, you are a competitive applicant, all right? You do not have to be doing all of the things. All right, so that brings us into our next point. I've mentioned a few times now these 5 traits. So we have found, after reading thousands of essays and speaking to admissions readers and hearing what they're looking for, there's really 5 traits that schools are looking for in their applicants. Different schools will kind of describe these traits or have different words for these traits, describe them in different ways. But if you are able to exemplify just 1 to 2 of these traits in your essays, you are going to be in great shape. All right. So drive. These are students that are pushing themselves to succeed no matter what. They're facing problems and often coming out a better person as a result of these problems. Colleges love driven students because these are like the movers and shakers on campus. All right. They are getting things done. All right. So students that are driven, colleges love students that are driven because students that are driven, you know, it's very easy to see how they will be successful in college and beyond because they're willing to put in the work. They want to show up in class. They want to get those good grades. They want to make a difference. All right. Intellectual curiosity, that is just learning for fun. Intellectual curiosity is very important to school, so important that Stanford has its own kind of intellectual curiosity question. And then Emory, as I mentioned before, uses intellectual curiosity as its own kind of category to rank students. So schools are really interested in intellectually curious students because they're wanting students that are going to have a passion for learning inside and outside of the classroom. They're wanting to explore the world, new viewpoints, things like that. Initiative. So these students are people who will improve. They're constantly thinking of how they can improve whatever it is that they are a part of. I think that in itself explains why schools are looking for students that take initiative. They're looking for people that are going to help improve the college and what's going on there, looking for ways to make it better, improve the lives of everyone on campus, and improve the college's reach and how they can help people and make an influence. Contribution is exactly what it sounds like. You are going above and beyond to make whatever you are a part of better as a direct result of your involvement and actions. So students that have contribution as their top trait are really the connective tissue on campus. That's kind of just similar to initiative, making everyone and everything better as a direct result of their being there, right? They're wanting to contribute to those ideas that the person that is taking initiative is starting. They're wanting to just improve the environment and what they're a part of. And then diversity of experiences is also exactly what it sounds like. You just have different life experiences and ways that you think about the world. Colleges want to have diverse campuses because these are people that can enrich the campus with unique perspectives and new ideas, spark interesting conversations, and have people grow. All right. So I tell students, I'm sure you all have many incredible traits. You're all very impressive, lovely people. But we want to make sure that in your essays, you are highlighting just 1 to 2 of these top traits. Going back to that final point about the myth of the well-rounded student. So we say that schools are looking for students that have just spikes of interests. One way to look at these spikes is through these particular traits here. So for students that have multiple traits, one opportunity that you have to make sure that you're covering all of these traits in your personal brand and through your essays is you could pick one trait to cover in your personal statement. And then in your supplemental essays, make sure that you're covering the other traits that are very important to you. So you can really make sure that, again, you're really painting this full picture of who you are, what's important to you, what you can contribute. So schools have this snapshot of who you are and why you are an asset to their campus. There's a lot of stuff surrounding these traits and topics of essays and things like that. So I want to pause here and see, Danielle, if there are any questions.
Yeah, so we do have some really awesome questions. I'm thinking that most of these we can save for the Q&A at the end.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I have them all written down, guys. So do not worry if your question is not getting answered. I have them. So you're good to go. We can cover them at the end, I think.
Perfect. And we are almost to that Q&A section, so no worries. We are going to get to those questions in just a moment. Some other things that I like to touch on when talking about the traits, because when discussing the traits, I think topic of essays comes up often. Excuse me. And we always tell students there are no hard or fast rules about what you should or should not write about in your essays, but there are some things that you should keep in mind because there are some topics that are more difficult to write about than others. And the reason for this is both that they are seen a lot, they're overdone. So admissions readers may not be as interested in what you are writing about. And then also they tend to come with familiar themes. So something that we really preach to our students is making sure that they have unexpected insights with unique themes, because this is how you're going to show the reader how your mind works, which is very important. So some examples of those topics that are difficult to write about: community service, sports, auditions, like in music, theater. Those essays usually have themes of overcoming nerves or anxiety. Sports essays have those common themes of hard work, teamwork. Community service has common themes of helping others, being inspired by the people that you help. And then essays about family, culture, role models. All of these can make for great essays, but the essays tend to become more about other people than about the student when they have essays about these topics. So we want to make sure that your student is the main character of their story. All right. I always tell them it's your personal statement. You want to make sure you're the main character. All right. Okay. So I don't see any specific questions. I know Danielle's monitoring as well. Any specific questions about essay topics or the traits? So I'm going to just share a little bit before we dive into the Q&A about how you can work with prompt. So we have two kind of options here. One way that's really helpful for students that are having difficulty getting started is we run these essay boot camps. I run them actually. So we have 2 live group sessions where students are going to get really a foundation of a lot of what I covered today, but in more specific detail pertaining to what schools are looking for, what students can write about, all of those kinds of things, how they should be approaching their essays. So we run boot camps for that. Students get started on writing their essays, and there will be coaches like Danielle, who's helping me here tonight, that support throughout the process. So students are able to get real-time feedback as they're going through brainstorming and making sure that their content is on the right track. And yeah, and then you get some rounds of feedback from our team as well. And then the other option is just one-on-one coaching. So this is a great option for students that want to work on their own schedule. You'll be assigned with one coach to work on you one-on-one throughout the entire essay process, from brainstorming, making sure that you're clear on your personal brand, through until you feel like your essays are ready to submit. So you'll have video coaching calls, an accountability coach to make sure that you are on track, unlimited reviews, written feedback on your essay, and yeah, just making sure that you're staying on track and moving in the direction that you need to move into. So we're running a special promotion tonight where you can get $10 off. So you see these prices here. The essay bootcamp is $189, and then one-on-one coaching for personal statements is $439. If you are interested in having your coach help you on other essays, maybe your supplemental essays, activities lists, things like that, you can always upgrade at any time. But that's those are kind of your options. We'd love to support you on your writing and your essays. So I just wanted to keep that up there before we dive into questions. I'm seeing a lot of really good questions coming in, so I'm going to turn it over to Danielle so she can feed them to me in order. I don't want to miss anything.
Awesome. Yeah. So jumping in, I guess this is a topic question. Like, what are your thoughts on writing about the pandemic, COVID education challenges, that kind of thing, like including that sort of content in your essays?
Yes, such a great question. So there's actually, because the pandemic happened, these schools realized that this is something that students are going to want to comment on. There's actually a COVID essay within the Common App. So we highly encourage students to use that space to talk about COVID related things, as opposed to putting it into your personal statement. Some things though to consider when writing the COVID essay is you have to keep in mind that everybody, literally everybody in the world experienced COVID. So you want to make sure that the things that you are discussing in your COVID essay really are going to contribute to proving you'll be successful in college and beyond. So really highlighting any big things that you overcame, highlighting any big changes or contributions you were able to make, anything that really exemplifies your traits. Those are the types of things that you would want to cover in your COVID essay. I'd be very careful of just talking about how like general, educational challenges, because everybody unfortunately went through that this past year and a half. So that's something that I would look out for. Brad actually has a great essay on the COVID-19 essay. I should say he has an article on the COVID-19 essay and how to approach it and things. I can try and pass that link along so you all can receive it in a follow-up email.
Awesome. Yeah. And so we also had somebody ask, this is an interesting question. Do you know if Ivy League admissions would consider 2 students from the same high school?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that the focus is more on a lot of the things that we covered today. So if there's students that are very qualified, if you had 2 amazingly qualified students from the same high school, they're not going to turn one away just because there's 2 students from the same high school. So I would say focus on making sure that you have the best application possible. You've done what you can for your academic score. Now focus on making sure that you have as strong of essays as possible so they can really see who you are, because it's more about who you are than the school that you went to, although that, plays a small role in your academic score.
Awesome. And this is kind of similar. If you have, two students who have equal academics, equal academic skills or score, how much would essays count at that point?
Yeah, so that's kind of goes back to those numbers that we looked at the beginning. So again, it's hard to know the exact breakdown for every single school because they don't, release this information. But from that Harvard data that I shared, we see that having strong essays can increase your chance by 10 times. So that's going to be the determining factor that sets you apart in that pool of applicants that have those similar academic scores. Within Harvard, I believe I mentioned there's 8,000 students that had similar academic scores, literally perfect academic scores according to Harvard. So of that 8,000, what's left to differentiate them and distinguish them is what makes up their personal scores.
Nice. So someone else also asked, this is kind of interesting, about students writing about how much they love the college that they were applying for and then getting admitted. So they were just kind of wondering what you think of that. I'm not sure if they were writing a YS essay or, but yeah, they're asking about your thoughts on that.
That's a really good question. So just so everyone knows, any specifics about a college would be covered in your supplemental essays. So your personal statement is that more broad look of who you are, what you can contribute to a school, because that essay is going to be going to several different schools. When we're talking about expressing your love for college, showing your demonstrated interest, we want that to be in your supplemental essays. And we want to make sure, though, within these supplemental essays, when you're expressing your love for a school, we want you to be as specific as possible. So we want to make sure you're avoiding talking about things like location. Maybe you want to apply to NYU because you've always wanted to live in New York, or you love New York. That doesn't really share why you want to attend NYU specifically, because you could apply to any schools in New York City. So we want to avoid things about talking about location. We want to avoid talking about any other sort of generalizations of things that could be on any college campus. So for example, if you went to a college campus, you visited, and you want to talk about how you loved the intellectual energy on campus, or you loved seeing students reading on the quad. Those are things that could be present at literally any school. So when you are talking about your love for a particular school, make sure that you have done your research and you're being as specific as possible.
Awesome. We also had somebody, this is a topic question. What are your thoughts on writing about an illness?
So when it comes to illness, we have students that choose to write about illness, whether that is physical or some sort of mental health situation. So the first thing that we want to ask them is this a core part of who you are? Does it prove you'll be successful in college and beyond? And does it showcase your top trait? So there's a lot of students that have this as a big part of who they are, but it doesn't necessarily tie into what they want to do in the future. They haven't really done anything as a result. And when I say that, I mean, for example, there's one student that had some sort of disorder, and it led her to create this club at her school surrounding accessibility and policy surrounding accessibility and things like that. So that's a student that was a core part of who they are, and they took action as a result of that particular thing. So I would say you can write about illness, but think about if that's what you really want, if that's a real core part of your story and what you'd like to share to these schools.
We also had somebody ask, if you mention an extracurricular in the Common App, I'm guessing they mean like under the activities list. Is it okay to write about that in your personal statement, or should you avoid kind of repeating that in your essay if you've already written about it in your activities list?
Sure. So when you're picking your experiences for your personal statement, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but we want to make sure that they're experiences that really highlight your top trait and are going to showcase you putting that trait into action. So we definitely don't want to be parroting things just off of your activities list, because clearly they have that there. You also have your supplement essays as an opportunity to expand upon particular activities, what you learned from them and how you grew, but that should be the focus. All right. The focus shouldn't be on the experience itself, but what you learned and kind of what happened as a result of that particular experience.
Awesome. And then we also had some questions just about working with prompt. If somebody has an essay that's already pretty much done and they just like want feedback on it, like what would be the best way to approach prompt if that's their situation?
Yeah, so you can just sign up. Go to this link on the page, prompt.com/road to college. You can just create a prompt account and you have the opportunity to just submit that single essay for review. So everybody, in addition to these options, you have so many free resources available to you through Prompt. You can go to this website, create your prompt account. We have a tool where you can add your colleges, create your college list, and we'll automatically pull all of the prompts for the essays that you need to write, both required and optional, an amazing free tool. And then you also are able to just submit essays for individual review from your prompt account. You'll see where you can just purchase a single review there.
And somebody also asked if there's additional dates for essay bootcamps beyond the dates we have next week.
Yeah, so I will have to double check to see if we are going into September with these boot camps. But so for the past couple of months, we've been running one set of one boot camp a month. So it's possible. I'd have to double check, and we can get back to you on that.
Awesome. We had somebody also ask, how do you feel about using humor in your essay?
Oh, such a good question. I love talking to students about making sure that their personality really shines through in their essays. If you are funny, we want you to be funny. If you're clever, you should be clever. Remember, this is your opportunity to really showcase who you are and your personality to all of these schools. We want to make sure that you are doing it tactfully. So we want to make sure that it makes sense and it's not too overdone, but you can definitely have some humorous components in your essay. One of the essays that we use as an example is about a student at her summer job rolling a burrito. And there's definitely humor injected into that essay, and you really get a sense of that student's voice and who she is. But she's also, really covering all the things that I've mentioned tonight and making sure that she's hitting the points of what schools are looking for in those college essays.
Awesome. And kind of going back with the traits, like when a student works with prompt, like do we kind of give them an idea of what traits that particular school is prioritizing, or like what qualities they're really looking for in the student?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't have a way of knowing what specifically schools are looking for, or where they're at in terms of like their, I guess, how much they have of each trait. So we just want to make sure that you're doing a great job of highlighting your trait, your top trait. And we take you through that. Some of what we do at the very beginning of the process before we even start writing is making sure that you are clear on what your top trait is, so we can make sure that your brainstorming experiences that clearly showcase that trait.
Awesome. We also had somebody kind of asking about what kind of information to include in the additional information section. I'm guessing they're referring to the Common App. I know a lot of schools have this kind of section. They're asking specifically about, if you have a long commute or something that prevents you from being able to do a lot of extracurriculars or part-time work or volunteering or whatever. So what kind of things should be included in the additional information section?
I was going to say, I saw that question come through and I was like, oh, that's a perfect thing to write about in the additional information section. So your additional information section is your opportunity to just include any sorts of little pieces of information that really don't have a home anywhere else in the application, and just providing additional information, insight into your particular situation, things that you might feel like there's any gaps or holes in your essay your application that don't really make sense. You can use that additional information section to elaborate and kind of, fill in those gaps.
Sweet. We also had somebody ask, what do you think about an essay that's about a life-changing experience that someone had at camp?
So I'll tell you, we have seen so many of those essays. But again, that doesn't mean that can't be what your essay is. If you worked with a coach, we'd want to take a close look at your particular experience, what that life-changing experience was, how it ties to your future ambitions, and what opportunities we have to really make sure that it's unique to who you are and really is showcasing your top traits. And we could maybe make that happen. But we'd also take a deep look and see if there's any other experiences that maybe do a better job at doing that, because life-changing camp experiences is something that's very common that we see.
Nice. We also had somebody asking specifically about one of the coalition essay prompts. I think they're talking about the one that's tell a story from your life that's describing an experience. I think it's like that demonstrates your character. So like, what does that really mean? Like, how do you answer that essay without, falling into that trap of like focusing too much on storytelling?
Yes, a great question. So I should clarify too and make sure that it's clear. So you're ultimately telling a story, all right, within these essays. So there's different structures that we highlight when we work with students. One of them, though, is the journey structure, which really is literally a story. You have a beginning, what we call an inciting incident, which is like the middle, and then your ending, what happened as a result of that particular experience. So you're painting this story, but we want to make sure that you are focusing on hitting all of these points, the things that schools are looking for. So again, what are your top traits? How does this tie to your future ambitions? How does this prove you'll be successful in college and beyond? So when we say we don't want you to just be storytelling, there's a lot of students that come to us that are spending their whole first paragraph or couple of paragraphs, like setting a scene and using all of this beautiful language, writing very beautifully. And you just don't really have enough space and time for that. Your readers are really trying to get to the point. I mentioned they spend about 8 minutes on average looking at applications. They're spending about 90 seconds on average just looking at each essay. So it's so important to make sure that you are clear, concise, and writing in your voice so they have an idea of who you are, what you can contribute as soon as possible. So they're checking these boxes in their head and looking for any reason to slide you into that no pile. So we just want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to make sure that they quickly see who you are and that they're rooting for you. You're going to be telling these stories because you're highlighting a journey and yourself, things that how you've grown and changed and how your perspectives on different things have changed, which is a story. You're providing background information and highlighting this transformation. So it is ultimately a story, but we want to look out for any of those kind of very specific storytelling kind of things, if that makes sense. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, we also had somebody ask if you have to write a different essay for each school.
Oh, a good question. So for your personal statement, no. That will go to several schools. There are different kinds of personal statements. So you have your Common App, someone mentioned the Coalition App, you have Applied Texas, the personal insight questions, but all of those are versions of a personal statement that will go to multiple schools. And then each school will have its own supplemental essays. So those will be different, and those are essays that you would write for each school. And again, you can go on to Prompt, create your free Prompt account, add your school list, and see what essays you would need to write for each of the schools you're applying to.
Nice. We had somebody also ask if for a supplemental essay, if you can write a poem. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, interesting. So there are different kinds of prompts for supplemental essays. Some of them are very straightforward. For example, why us? Why this major? There are also a lot of creative prompts for supplemental essays. I would say, I don't know, Danielle, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I don't know if I've ever seen a successful essay that was a poem that is doing everything that a supplemental essay needs to do, which is, first of all, answer the prompt right away. Even in those creative prompts, schools are looking for specific information from you. So, for example, schools will ask, like, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go? They're not looking to hear about your love for vacationing, but it's an opportunity for you to highlight your other interests and strengths and give more insight into who you are and what's important to you. Writing a poem just isn't able to give you, or give the reader rather, all the information that they're really looking for. And you usually don't have that much space for these essays. They could be as low as 40 characters, and some of them are as high as like 800, but on average, they're around, I think, mostly 100 to 250 words. Most of them fall into that area. So you don't have that much space to do all the things you need to do.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's a really cool idea, but like Ariel said, like it's kind of hard to like highlight the traits you need to be highlighting with a poem. And a lot of schools do have like creative portfolios as well. So like if you're applying for like creative writing or an English major, like you do have that opportunity there to actually submit writing samples, like where you could submit a poem or a screenplay or whatever you're working on. So that may be a better place to like showcase that skill. But yeah. Let's see, we have another question. When is the best time to start getting essay help? This person has a rising junior who's already looking at brainstorming and looking at essays online, which is awesome. But like, what do you think is the best time to start like writing essays and getting help on them?
Yeah, so we say start as early as possible, but within reason though. So if you're a rising junior, that means you still have all of your junior year ahead of you. Something that is very important that we remind students is that when you're writing about experiences in your essay, schools are looking for experiences that are recent because they showcase who you are right now, which is what they're looking for. They want to know what your current worldview is and what your recent actions have been surrounding your traits and the things that you're working towards. So when you're a junior, I think it's awesome that you're getting started looking at essays, getting a feel for the process. But this is an amazing time to just investigate your passions. Make sure that you're creating experiences so when the time comes, you have some ample ammunition to write about for all of the essays that you're going to be covering. As far as writing goes, we usually encourage students to don't start actually writing until at least spring semester of your junior year. By that time, you have had the opportunity to have a lot of experiences, but also you've just given time to just further develop your writing and your voice. So we think that that amount of time is kind of a good sweet spot to get started.
Awesome. I think I got everybody's questions. I'm pretty sure that is all.
Amazing. This is last call, going once, going twice. Again, if you think about any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me. I think my email's on here somewhere. Yes, there it is. Feel free to reach out to me. That's my email. I'm happy to help however I can. Again, that additional $10 discount is only for tonight until our tech team wakes up in the morning, which varies from anywhere from 7 a.m. to maybe 10 a.m. It really depends on the day. So I say just leap on it if you want to take advantage. I hope this was helpful. I see someone just quickly dropped in twins. We work with so many twins. We're happy to help you and your twins. I'm so glad this was helpful. best of luck to all of you, families and students. I hope that I will see some of you in boot camps next week. And otherwise, have a great rest of your night. Bye, everyone. I'll linger for a couple minutes if any other questions come in. So someone asked about the date in September. Let me see right now if I can have someone respond to me and see if we are going to do another date in September. Let's see. You are so welcome. All right, I'm checking with my team right now. Okay, it looks like we are going to be doing dates in September as well. So if you are wanting to take advantage of the $10 discount and do the boot camp, we are doing it in September as well. All right. Thank you all so much. I'll still stick around for any final questions here. If you want to sign up for the September dates, you can, if you make your purchase, you can just let us know, and we'll be able to just push you over to the next month. Oh, and the dates. They're not posted yet because they are not finalized, but we will be having them, but they are not finalized yet. So if you're wanting to register for September, once you make your purchase, you can email. I'm going to drop it in the chat here. Just send a note to this email and we will make sure that you are pushed over to September. So students for their personal statements will write an essay to the specific Common App prompts, but for those supplemental essays, different schools will have specific prompts for their supplemental essays. You should definitely always have full, complete sentences. We want to make sure too, even though you're keeping it short and concise, that you are writing effectively and clear. So I would try and definitely write full sentences following all the grammatical rules, but see if you can make them as concise as possible. Yes, I absolutely understand needing to know the dates. Unfortunately, we probably will not have those until closer to when those dates arise. if you wanted to send an email to the email that I dropped in the chat, we can definitely let you know once those are finalized. So you'll have to make 2 different accounts, one for each twin. And it's a little bit weird for parents of twins. You will be attached to one of the twins, I believe, but not both of them. You could try different emails. Yeah, that should work, actually. All right, everyone. I think I'm going to call it. Thank you all so much again for spending your evening with me. I hope you have a lovely rest of your night. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to send me an email. All right. Bye, everyone.